back, and I'm anxious to talk further about the challenge that we're facing from China, particularly in the military space, which happens to pretty much cover everything because the Chinese, as I think we've talked about on many occasions, have a doctrine of civil military fusion. That means that essentially everything that they do is in the service of advancing their military capabilities, the People's Liberation Army. There is no better expert in the world, as far as I'm concerned, than our next guest. His name is Richard Fisher. He is a senior fellow of the International Assessment and Strategy Center. He is a voluble contributor to the public policy debate about what the Chinese Communist Party is up to and what it means for us. He's always a welcome guest here. Rick, good to have you, albeit by phone today. We're glad to have at least a chance to talk with you. So thank you for taking the time, sir.
Thank you, Frank.
There was a recent test, Rick, of ballistic missile defense capabilities by the Chinese communists. They call it the sword and spear test. The threat against which they profess to be working is one of a modernized U.S. intercontinental ballistic missile, a ground based missile that won't be in the inventory, I think, for some years now. And the possibility of shorter range missiles being deployed to what's called by them the first island chain. Those aren't anywhere in sight that I'm aware of. But talk us through what the Chinese have demonstrated with this test and the grounds for doing so.
Certainly, Frank. This was the sixth acknowledged Chinese mid-course missile interception, meaning that the interception took place just above the atmosphere in space. During previous tests, the United States has accused China of conducting anti-satellite interception tests. So the system that is being developed, and it has been tested now for over a decade, is likely dual capable. It's capable of intercepting intercontinental ballistic missile warheads that the Chinese want to shoot down, and capable of intercepting satellites that the Chinese Communist Party, People's Liberation Army, is seeking to shoot down. This program to develop an anti-missile, anti-satellite capability goes back to the 1980s. And the system that is being tested is likely called the HQ-19. And it is a 3 to 4 stage derivative of the Dongfeng 21 medium range ballistic missile. The Chinese developed a company or created a company to build this missile back in the late 1990s, and were advertising this company at their early Zhuhai air shows. So it's been a long time coming, and now it is reaching an advanced state of capability at a time when China is vastly increasing the size of its nuclear missile arsenal.
Right.
In my estimation, the Chinese could have about 4,000 warheads, 3 times the size of America's missile warhead arsenal by the end of this decade, early of the next decade. And
Wow.
they are combining a robust national missile defense capability with nuclear superiority over the United States. Now, it's
This.
curious. For the last 40 years, the Chinese have been blasting the United States for its missile defense developments. Just vicious attacks regularly. And now China,
To say nothing of their space activities,
yeah, they're
which we
adopting the actually the rhetoric of the Reagan administration. They
right,
want a defense against nuclear missiles.
right.
And so they've gotten away with gaslighting us, Frank. And now they're not just are they going to have the swords to attack us, they're going to have the shield to defend against us.
Mhm.
Deterrence will break down.
Yeah, that's the big concern here, isn't it, Rick Fisher? That we've been watching a modernization program that is designed not for deterrence, but in fact for nuclear war fighting, emerging from the Chinese Communist Party alongside all of these other conventional capabilities. And this brings me to a question that I always feel compelled to ask you about. You've sort of touched on it already in connection with this anti satellite capability. But Rick, you've made as close a study of what the Chinese are doing, particularly in this civil military fusion kind of context in space. There's a report that I've just seen about them claiming that they will be the first to return samples from the Martian planet, beating us by some time in doing so. But how does this fit into the larger agenda of the Chinese Communist Party with both respect to this, well, as Danny Graham used to call it, high frontier, but also the impact that space has in terms of terrestrial domination, which, of course, is the purpose driving the Chinese Communist Party?
Well, yes, Frank. The uh, news that China could return samples from Mars about 2 years before the United States would launch a mission to do that, provided, of course, that that mission continues to be funded,
Mhm.
is with what consistent with how the Chinese Communist Party views space. It views space as the ultimate high ground, and the power that has the most assets in space has the most assets on the farthest possible bodies that can be reached is the power that will control the Earth Moon system, and in the future, the Earth Moon Mars system. Now,
Mhm.
we've been hearing for a long time about how, in the next century perhaps, prosperity on Earth will be driven and eventually dependent on commercial, mining, manufacturing activity in space, on the moon, and then Mars. The Chinese Communist Party wants to be able to control access to the moon and then to Mars. It does not want to have to depend on the goodwill of the United States. And when it achieves the position of being able to deny access to the moon and Mars to the United States, it will use that position to dominate conflict on Earth, to contain the United States, and eventually to undermine and destroy our democracy, just like they will undermine and destroy every other democracy.
Mhm.
This is a fight to the finish. And the Chinese Communist Party does not have any uh, structure, mental or biological, that compels it to live with another power. It
Hmm.
wants to destroy all powers that would stand in its way.
Yeah. And Rick, this is what's so extraordinarily important about your research. You're able to connect the proverbial dots between the stated ambitions of the Chinese Communist Party for global domination. I guess one might even say interplanetary domination at that, with the programs that they're pursuing to actually facilitate and enable the realization of those ambitions. And it makes so vital, this analysis does, your critique of the shortcomings of our own capabilities in all of these regards. It's just vital that we be clear about this. and take corrective action. And let me ask you about one thing that I gather is causing the Chinese considerable upset, and that is SpaceX private sector initiative known as Starlink, thousands and thousands of satellites, which the Chinese evidently regard as something that might give us a resiliency in space that would be a problem for them. Speak to that in 30 seconds, if you could,
Certainly,
Rick.
Frank. The Chinese have spent the last 3 decades at least trying to dominate the internet on Earth, trying to control markets for servers and all the hardware for internet on Earth. And along comes Elon Musk with his Starlink constellation. He wants to put up 30, 40,000 satellites into low Earth orbit and essentially create what the Chinese fear will be an internet
Mm-hmm.
in space that they cannot control, an internet in space that is already helping Ukraine to fight
Mm-hmm.
the Russian invasion,
Indeed.
as it will likely also help Taiwan to fight the Chinese invasion. They
Rick,
hate this. They're afraid of it.
they are indeed, and that's a good thing as far as I'm concerned. Rick Fisher, we have to leave it at that. Thanks for the great work you do at the International Assessment and Strategy Center. Thank you for being a member of our Committee on the Present Danger China and for your contributions to this program with some regularity. We hope we can get you back very soon. And in the meantime, thanks for joining us by phone
Thank you,
today.
Frank.
Next up, we'll speak with George Racely about the January 6th committee and other shenanigans in Washington right after this.